Hi. In our project is dealing with retention in first year and developing a model to help predict early students that are at risk. In our team, there's 4 partners. Aoife and I are lecturers in the Department of Computing and Mathematics, and Richard Hayes is our Institute Vice President for Strategic and Institutional Transformation, and Mark O'Dowd is a data analyst in the Strategic Office. Sorry. No, it worked a second ago. Sorry. So, what are we trying to do? We're concerned about the relatively high non-progression rate we have in first year, in particular in computing and related disciplines. Currently, what happens is that we have students who come into difficulty, and by the time we identify them, it's too late. What do we mean by being too late? Really 3 things. One, by the time we start interacting with them, the quantity of work that they need to recover is too big. So even with one-on-one support, there's just too much stuff for them to do. This is especially critical now when we've gone semesterized and we have our 12-week semesterization sort of race between up to Christmas. Secondly, what often happens with our students is that they go through a couple of months of struggle and self-doubt, and by the time they come to student services, they've already made up their mind that this is not for them. And so really all they do when they engage with student services is basically just to declare their intention to leave. So it's effectively too late. Thirdly, sometimes it is in the student's best interest to leave or to move to a different course. And by not giving them advice early, they don't leave by the 31st of October deadline, which affects a lot of their funding. So it means when they try to come in back a second time, when they're more prepared for whatever, they have to pay this financial cost to them. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify as early as possible students who may be at risk and then have some interventions to help them make better decisions and to fix issues before they become overriding. This project is a part of the WIT's overall strategy to try to become more data aware and more data responsive. We've been collecting data, as all institutes have, through Banner and so on and so forth for years, but it just sits there and has rarely been utilised properly. So we're just trying to make better decisions based on what we have. And in order to give you an idea of where we're at and what we've done so far, I'll show you the initial project timeline as we gave in the project proposal interview stage, and then talk about how that has evolved. Our project is in 4 stages. There's model development, there's our retention initiatives, then a model rollout of our predictive model, and finally the analysis. Today, our main focus is on model development. I just want to note that in our this is our original project timeline. We were unclear in terms of our documentation here, and we had 2019 down for our cohort. We talked about it at the time, and it was actually 2018/2019 cohort. In terms of how the project has evolved, so let's just talk a bit more about that first phase, the model development phase. The data gathering part is complete, and we have, and by complete, what we mean here is that we've got all the data for our current cohort, and we've got processes in place that allow us to do the same for our next cohort in September 2019, so in order for us to do our analysis. In terms of model development, I actually should talk about the colouring here. Any of the exclamation marks here in blue, they reflect things that we've changed from our original proposal, and I talk about why these changes have happened. Otherwise, the green, the yellow, and the red, whenever they're there, they have the same colouring scheme as described in the project guidelines. So, what has changed? One of the issues that we've come across, and it was flagged by the panel and in the proposal stage, deals with we're looking at personal data of students and having permission for them. We've we went forward in front of our ethics committee, and what we've actually arrived at is the following. We've developed two models. One is an anonymous model, where we don't have any, we've no way of identifying individual students from, and we have a non-anonymous model. The anonymous model is complete, and by being anonymous, we actually can get historical performance data going back for 3-4 years. On the non-anonymous, we can only get historical data for this year because we had a revised consent form for our students who signed up last September, and which allowed us to use that data for research purposes. The historical data before that point we can't. So we've ended up effectively having two models for predictive purposes. In terms of the actual that model, the anonymous one has been developed and tested on the current cohort, but hasn't been used in the historical one yet, which just doing that at present. Also, in terms of the non-anonymous model, the model, by non-anonymous I should say that, a non-anonymous model has personal data like gender, age, what their second level performance, what school they went to. Ultimately, at the moment, we ring-fence that data set simply because in order to allow, if we stay anonymous, we can go over a longer period of time, so we have more data to play with. However, some comment that actually we met Geraldine Gray recently from the first presentation this morning, and a comment that she said actually that kind of resonates with us is this. If we're talking to students and talking to them saying, hey, we've identified you at risk, it's a lot nicer if we can say the reasons as to why you're at risk are factors within your control, as in your interaction with the college since you've registered. It's much nicer if we can say that, as opposed to us saying, hey, the reasons we identify you at risk are factors that are outside your control, as in your second level results, or your gender, or your school that you came from. So what way we're progressing is as follows. We're trying to get as high as accuracy as possible in our anonymous model, and if that's good enough, we will stay with that. So it's nicer, it's an easier message, and it's a better message to say to our students, hey, we've identified you at risk because of these activities, and if you change them, we can help you change them. So that's basically where we're at. Another change that has happened is that our model needs to be a little bit larger than what we originally envisaged. I'll talk about that in a second or two. Other than that, the only other change that we want to talk about is that in terms of our retention initiatives, again, this is something that was flagged in the panel at the proposal stage. We had timing issues in terms of talking to our 2018/2019 non-progression cohort. So we've actually moved that to next year's cohort instead. Okay, so to give you an idea as to how the actual model has evolved, has developed, let's just talk a little about what data we get and where does it come from. We have three main data sources. We have Banner, which is ubiquitous across the IoTs, a system for storing all student records and student performance, and also our personal data, our pre-registration data, as we call it. We have two other data sources that we've used mainly. We have a WIT module catalog, which is a piece of software that WIT has in-house, has developed in-house to store our modules, our module descriptors. So it stores our assessment structures. And finally, we have Moodle, which is our VLE. So in terms of data, what do we'd get? From Banner, we get all our personal pre-registration data, gender, age, CO, and so on and so forth, as I mentioned. We get And we will be polling that a few times in September because students register late at various time points. Performance, a data set is the historical performance on modules for previous year's cohorts. We always get down our approved course schedules. From our catalogue, we get our assessment methods, and those two are put together to do two things. Like all institutions, WIT has separate data sets that are managed, but the joining between the two of them is semi-manual. That causes problems. Year on year, we have a drift in our data sets. So what we need to do is, there's a lot of work to reconcile them, which is what we're using those two data sets for. Oh, sorry, I better go. Yeah, thanks. The last data set then is the one that's most important. The last data set is our interaction, dealing with student activity post-registration. Okay, in terms of that data set, interaction data set, this is at the size of the actual data we're working with. The project is focused on looking at the modules within and programs within our department. That's 56 modules, 11 programs. But obviously we want to scale this out to our school and eventually to the institute. So that's the kind of the size of the data we're working with. Events in Moodle are effectively any student interaction with a resource, any student interaction uploading of an assignment, and so on and so forth. Our Moodle is a critical resource, and in terms of this project, as you can see back there, we actually are getting the data down on a weekly basis. So our process for doing that is critical. And so the process we've been using, or have agreed with the Moodle team, is a weekly snapshot of part of the Moodle database, uploading into our own local MySQL, filter out the users, the modules, the events based on our study, and then apply our predictive model from there. And we've been doing that on this year's 2018-2019 data set. In terms of what does that data look like, it's very diverse. If I look at the 56 modules in our department, we've a spectrum. We've information-rich modules where we can know everything, effectively, down to the other side where we have information-poor modules. In terms of information-rich modules, we're talking about modules that have attendance records. We're talking about modules that have assignments. And you can see there from the graph there, the number of assignments goes up as far as 41 assignments. In fact, in our department, there's a module there that's 43 assignments. Students don't have to do all of them, just so in case you're really worried. What happens is a lot of modules in Moodle, you have a facility for grouping classes. So what happens is you might have different assignments that are done by different students. Quizzes are a really effective way of measuring student activity, and our Moodle team has been very good at recommending, promoting quizzes, but in terms of having a lot of training events, but lecturers don't seem to use them a lot. So as you can see, that we only use them in 8 of our modules, which is a pity. I personally think quizzes are brilliant. In terms of information-poor modules, these are modules which have no Moodle presence at all. That's bad news because we have no way of dealing with them. On the other hand, for our department, they tend to be the modules that have a less of a problem in terms of non-progression. So in a sense, in our department, I'm less concerned with them. This is not true if you go as far as school-wide. If you go to the science side, the physics modules, for example, have a very low Moodle presence, but they have a higher failure rate. An emerging issue that we have that we didn't think about in December is one of the things we're doing in our department is we're encouraging students to use professional tools for programming. Version control tools, for example, like Git. And in order to encourage them to use it, we're moving from having assignments in Moodle to having assignments up in GitHub, which is great because students then are using these tools. But the downside is we no longer get their access on Moodle. So one of the things that we're looking at present is having a process where our model also looks at the repositories that students actually have externally and bring it in. Now that's taking extra work that we hadn't at all thought about it back in December. But we'll need it going forward. It's not a problem right now, but it will be a problem in a year's time in terms of this model. Other than that, so finally, just an impact to date. In terms of identifying students at risk, on the information-rich modules are easy. If we look at it, 2 different targets, the target of predicting whether students will drop out during the semester or not, we have a 91% accuracy. In terms of predicting whether a student will achieve full credits in the model, we have actually at this point as 83% accuracy by week 3. This is on the information-rich modules. In terms of, it has an impact in terms of how we should be designing our models, our modules, sorry. We've just gone through a school review, and during that process, all lecturers have been updating their module descriptors. We all fall into the habit of having 2 assignments or 3 assignments, like week 3, week 7, and week 10 kind of idea. What this data so far shows is that that model is not effective at all in helping our students. We all hit our students at the same time at week 3 and 4, and they all are highly stressed out. Our modules are not taught in isolation. So we're very much pushing towards the idea of having a hello world type activities as early as possible. So they contribute to your overall grade, so students are encouraged to do it, but the same learning outcomes covered in those early activities can be recovered later on in the semester. To allow so this won't be a barrier to students. Finally, the last thing I'll talk about, whether this thing works beyond our school to the overall institution or not, very much comes down to interaction with other parties. In particular, I want to thank our WIT Student Union and our retention office, who have been very much involved in this from early days. In issues like this in other institutions, have had problems when we may have your predicted data, but no actions are being followed on, and without that, it won't be effective. Okay, thanks. Sorry. Oh, sorry.